So blood vessels are remarkably complex, the simple ones being capillaries, which are only one cell thick, but arteries and veins have got a unique structure which allows them to carry the different blood around the body. Arteries in general carrying oxygenated and veins in general carrying deoxygenated. Most blood vessels in the body follow this rule. The only ones that don't are the pulmonary, which reverse. So the pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood and the pulmonary vein carries oxygenated. But we need to know the simple structure of these at GCSE, and also we need to link it to the function of the heart and the whole fact of it's got a double pump system. So blood is pumped twice out of the heart to complete a full circuit, going to the lungs, back to the heart, to the body, then back to the heart again. Just a quick recap. Blood is made of four constituent parts. We have plasma, which is the liquid part, red blood cells, which carry oxygen, white blood cells, the immune system, and platelets, which assist with clotting. You can cover that again in the blood video if you want to just go back through that quickly. So the circulatory system is vital for all function of the body because it provides an essential transport mechanism to get glucose to the cells and oxygen to the cells and carry waste material as CO2 away. And it all relies on the heart pumping this round. The heart is our engine effectively that powers everything else that goes on. The mitochondria, of course, release energy in the form of ATP, but they can't do that without the heart pumping blood and delivering oxygen to the respiring tissue. So it's the transport mechanism that allows substances to be carried around the body. Arteries carry blood away from the heart, artery away, A for A, and veins carry blood into the heart. There's a little in veins, that really helps you remember it. And between the two, we have capillaries, which are tiny one-cell thick blood vessels which permeate the entire tissue. There is a huge network of them which just provide close proximity to all cells of the body to ensure that oxygen is delivered and waste is removed. What a lot of people don't realize is arteries and veins are both classed as organs, same as the heart is an organ, because they're made up of multiple tissue. Whereas capillaries are not, they're only single cell thick, so by default they cannot be made of multiple tissue, therefore they're not classed as organs. So arteries and veins are organs, capillaries are actually just tissue. Arteries and veins both have unique cross section. So arteries in general are quite thick in the wall with a thin hole or lumen, that's the tube that the blood goes through, whereas veins have a thinner wall and a larger lumen or a larger hole the blood can pass through. And we can see right at the bottom there, capillaries are simply one cell thick. They are incredibly good at allowing diffusion to occur because it's a short diffusion pathway. Therefore, oxygen can be delivered and CO2, urea, stuff like that can be removed. Don't worry about the individual names of the different structures there. Muscular layer, elastic layer, and lining cells are fine at GCSE. So the different comparison between arteries, veins, capillaries is best represented as a table. So the arteries have got a very thick muscular wall, whereas veins have a very thin muscular wall. The same is for the elastic layer, with a thick elastic layer to cope with the expansion of the pressure, because the heart pumps with incredible force. It's the equivalent force of squeezing a tennis ball in your hand. So that creates a lot of pressure on the arteries. The arteries have to be stretchy to accommodate that blood, but also have to have that thick muscular layer to withstand the pressure so they don't burst. Whereas veins are under low pressure, so they don't need a thick muscular or elastic layer. So the overall cross-section thickness of an artery is very thick, and in comparison, the veins are thinner. Capillaries break all the rules because they don't follow the same principle. They're only one cell thick and they are tiny. They are the same size roughly as a single red blood cell. And the lumen, that tube that the blood flows down, is incredibly thin just to allow that rapid diffusion into the surrounding tissue. Final note there, arteries do not have valves, veins do, and capillaries are too simple to have them, so they can't have any. So looking at the veins and the valves within them, they're actually referred to as pocket valves because they catch things within them and stop blood flowing back. So they're quite a unique structure. So as muscles contract, they push on the veins, which increases the pressure within them. This forces blood upwards and it moves through the valve. And then as the heart stops beating for that fraction of a moment, blood would naturally want to fall back, but the valves catch it and stop it. So they're designed to catch the blood before it flows back and can collect as, say, the ankles or something like that. So just to reinforce that, muscular contractions, say in the leg, will push blood upwards towards the heart. Then as the heart stops beating or the muscles relax, blood would naturally want to flow back down to her ankles and then swell with blood. So the pocket valves are designed to be one way, and they act like little cupped hands catching the blood as it falls back. The blood vessels surrounding the valves will swell a little bit, but that will then ease out as the next heartbeat occurs and pushes the blood further up. It's a little bit like trains being shunted along. As the engine hits the back carriage, it pushes all the rest of them along. One of the most fascinating things about the circulatory system is the double circulatory pump we have. Blood, as I said earlier, was pumped twice through the heart to complete one circuit. I've tried to represent this in a really simple diagram, and I've color coded it as well. So we've got oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in red and blue. The heart receives blood and it then pumps that blood out very high in oxygen to the surrounding tissue, wherever that tissue is, in your arm, in your leg, wherever, doesn't matter. It's carrying oxygen to that tissue, where it's delivered, and in turn it picks up things like urea and CO2. Now that CO2 needs to be got rid of, but we've lost the oxygen, so now the blood is deoxygenated. It comes back to the heart, high in CO2, low in oxygen, where it gets repressurized and pumped out as deoxygenated blood to the lungs, where the CO2 is removed and new oxygen is loaded onto the hemoglobin. So it picks up loads of oxygen in the lungs and comes back to the heart, oxygenated to complete the cycle. Once it gets back to the heart, it gets repressurized so it can make the long journey around to the tissue again, returns to the heart, back to the lungs, rinse and repeat. And just to bear in mind, when it gets to the tissue, the final stage of transport goes through the tissue fluid. That's the stuff that makes us nice and squishy and is achieved via diffusion. So we can see this here. So this is quite a complex diagram, but I'll try and sort of highlight it using the little pointer here. So let's assume we're in the right lung and we have just picked up oxygen as a red blood cell. We travel through the pulmonary vein behind the aorta and arrive in the left atrium here. The heart then squeezes the top and blood is pushed down into the left ventricle, where the bottom of the heart now squeezes simultaneously, left and right ventricle together, and blood is now pumped out into the aorta. Let's say it travels all the way round the body, down the side of the body here to the legs, where oxygen is now delivered to your foot. You're tapping your foot or something like that. It now travels back in the veins to the heart, where it arrives in the right atria, gets pumped into the right ventricle, and then it gets pumped out under reasonably high pressure into the pulmonary artery, where it goes, let's say, to the left lung this time. It now picks up oxygen and gets rid of its CO2, trickles back in the pulmonary vein to the left atria, where it can then be pumped into the left ventricle and then out. And let's say it goes up the head this time. And eventually, after it's delivered its oxygen to your brain, it will then come back via the vena cava into the right atrium to continue the cycle. Nice picture. Don't worry so much about the terms of the valves there. We'll cover that later, but we don't need to know tricuspid, mitral, or bicuspid valve at GCSE. We just need to know valves, which we'll look at later. A little fact to finish off on: high blood pressure is classed as a silent killer. The irony is low blood pressure is just as dangerous as high blood pressure, but we should have around about 120 over 80, which is talking about the pressure. I often thought the 80 was heartbeat. It's not. It's 120 is the high pressure as the blood squeezes, and 80 is the low pressure as it's relaxing. We fluctuate between those two. But anything over 140 is going into hypertension or high blood pressure. 160 or above is really bad. That's where you can actually start to suffer heart attacks, aneurysms, where the heart beating so hard with so much pressure that blood vessels can actually rupture. If that happens in the brain, you end up with a stroke. And the same is with below 120. That can actually be quite dangerous because you could risk passing out. Obviously, different people have different pressure extremes. Some people are quite fine at 135, 140 even, where some people start to suffer problems when they go to 125, 130. So it all depends on individual genetic makeup. Thanks a lot. Bye.